Yo, yeah, how's it going, everybody? I'm Atayo, first son of Enki. It still sounds stupid to say that, and I wish I was joking, but I'm actually not. I'm going to tell you the second half of how the current humanity came into existence and why we are so incredibly important. Why we rose up against our masters and why half of the Anunnaki died fighting to free us from the other half. Okay. Did you ever wonder why, half the Anun fought against the other half? I'm going to explain a story that I never even got to tell my master. It's a story that is going to be impossible for anyone to believe, but I'm going to tell it anyway. This story explains why I know how the universe functions and why I know that it evolves. This story starts 250 billion years ago. In the earlier universe, when the universe was much smaller, much less complex, and where there are 7 layers that govern it now, there were only 3 that governed it then. At this time, many of the reactive elements that exist in the universe today were all bunched together in single elements. It made the reactive principles of the universe at the time explosive, hyper-reactive, unfathomable in potentials. There were evolved beings, life forms that could wield massive amounts of energy because of the reactive properties within their evolved forms. Funnily enough, a lot of the science fiction beliefs, fantasy, things about magic, George Lucas wrote a beautiful story, a Star Wars, that reflects the type of reactive principles that existed within the universe 250 billion years ago. At this time, there was a galaxy of life. This, by the time I'm telling the story, the galaxy was old, very old. Within this galaxy existed a group of entities that were offset in the wrong direction. It's hard to describe exactly what we were. We were all in relation to the other life. We didn't really interact. We sort of watched, and occasionally we'd plop ourselves down into little corporeal entities and wander around for a few centuries or thousands of years to learn some stuff, and then go back to our general existence above all things. We were galactic entities in a sense, but we were also something else. Life at this time was very, very different because there wasn't, like there is now, there wasn't a transient layer of the universe, a transient conscious layer that governs life and death. Life and death existed in a single layer. It was very messy and complicated. The universe's principles were also simpler. It wasn't as complex. It wasn't as balanced. It was still experimenting with certain principles. And the principle of life at this time was very new. This was the first or second, I'm not entirely sure. All I know is what I was there. But it was very, very early in life. And the life started to consume exponentially. It was all that it knew. It was very simplistic in relation to the life that exists in the universe today. But it basically consumed out to the edge. And then there was a breaking point. It wasn't even that everything ran out. It was that something realized that at some point everything would run out. And everything turned in on itself. There was war, I suppose, would be this huge galactic universal war. There were only, at this time, like a few hundred galaxies. But all the galaxies followed similar principles, and they all died. They just went stagnant and just died. Life across the entire universe just died. Just no life anywhere. What I found was when this happened, myself and these other things that I was with, these other entities, my people, I suppose I could say, were these massive balls of light floating above this black river. This is how my human mind now perceives visual images of the memories I have. This is not how it happened. This is my human mind creating a visual representation of the event so I can explain it to you. All right? What I perceived, what I'm able to share is we were all massive balls of light. We were enough to be all. We were enough that we now, in this state, perceived all of existence. And all of these giant balls of light started to drift away. They didn't need the universal space anymore. There was nothing left for them there. So they started to, I suppose, in current conceptual understanding, they ascended. They ascended beyond universal space. However, I looked back. There wasn't anything for me that way. And when I looked back, I saw an infinite amount of these tiny little lights, these tiny little balls of light, trillions of them, almost an infinite amount, just scattered across this river. And many were falling over the edge of the river, basically dissipating, being lost to confusion. And I saw the universe, in a sense, all of it, from beginning to end, and realized it was just a confused infant. It didn't understand what had happened to it. It was simply all of a sudden quiet. It was like it had just been born and was a crying baby, all alone, with no parents, no doctor, no one. Just this crying, alone infant in this void with these tiny little lights, just bound in confusion and completely lost. They couldn't return to vessels because there was no life left to return to. They were just there. So I scooped up as many as I could carry. You would liken it to being a computer. Imagine I'm a computer, a laptop, and I have a specific storage capacity. So what I did was I reached into this black river and I fished out my storage capacity of code fragments, which were these little life forms. And I took as many as I could store. I bound them, and then I dropped myself into the river, beneath the river. And what I found, where I found myself, was between forward and back. The universe, like I explained in a previous video, is like an infinity symbol. All right? So there's a forward and a back. All right, a top layer here and a top layer here with all the layers in between, and then a transition point. All right, this is what I call the infinite horizon, and this is where I sat. I sat in the void between forward and back because it was the only area with no values that was protected from the dangerous universal space outside. This was how I was able to store these code fragments. I was able to lock them in place, to hold them with me. And I waited. And I watched. Now, what I was waiting for was an answer to a question I had. When I asked my people, what is missing? That was the question, everything. What is missing? Why did everything die? What is missing? Okay. Now, what I was looking for a bridge. There is a positive and a negative, but there was no gray area. I was looking for the gray area, but for the other people that ascended, left, these other lights. For them, in our conceptual understanding would be, it is what it is. That is the way things are, so that's what happened. That was satisfactory to them. That wasn't enough for me. So I sat in the infinite horizon watching the universe go forward and back around me and waited for this answer, this bridge. It's like waiting for, how do I describe it? It's like waiting for blue and yellow, right? We had blue, we had yellow. I was looking for green. I needed green. That's what I was looking for. And as I waited, billions of years turned to tens, turned to hundreds. And the universe changed and evolved around me. Life regrew and died and regrew. And then a conscious network formed that governed life and death within universal space. But still, there was no bridge. There was no green in the yellow and blue. And that is what I was waiting for. And then as I began to fade, by the end I had forgotten what I was. I had forgotten everything we were. All I had left were the code fragments I had stored and the singular knowledge of what I was looking for, this green. And then I saw it, this patch. It was abstract. It wasn't as I expected, but it was a chance. And I reached. It was like reaching for something with every fiber of your being and being sucked into it beyond any power of your control. It was unfathomable in its confusion and bombardment upon every fiber of my being, for it had been so long. And then I found myself in the corporeal world once again. Yet I was not the trees and the grass and the birds and the fish. I was this singular thing with fingers and teeth and a tongue, and breathing was suddenly a thing. And I watched a being enter and look at me and utter the words, "Enut AYU. You are my first surprise." Because this being that I fell into was meant to be Enki's vessel, but what he had inadvertently created was the bridge between predator and prey that I had been seeking. I didn't even know that's what I was looking for. But suddenly I was in a snake and a monkey. I was in this weird, bald creature. And I, at the time, had no idea who or what I was. Didn't have a freaking clue, man. It took a long time for my master to actually work out what I was and what I was carrying. Now this is the important part. This is the really important part. What Enki found within me was what he was missing within his creation. So a pact was made between an ancient transient spirit and a god of corporeal form. He would create a storage area for my spirit, in a sense. He created a wall around a transient area of universal space and then killed me. Once I was inside his storage system, he was able to break down these code fragments out of my being And he was then able to fashion corporeal entities, right? The 7 daughters of Eve are the 7 representations of all of those little tiny lights I carried here, right? And from AYU and the 7 daughters of Eve, all of humanity was born. And all of humanity was born with a soul, with one of these soul fragments that we had carried here, that I had carried, that was carried here. It doesn't matter who carried it here. But humanity is the last remnant of this ancient universal intelligence that existed in, basically you could say, another universe. What humans became was our own civilization, but we're also tools of the Anunnaki. We were servants, and that was the pact made. We would forever and eternally serve as long as we would eternally live. That very easy, man. Survival is everything. Any life form deems to survive. And dude, I literally knew what Enki was. Like, never did the Anunnaki show us their true level of technology. You often depict them as having rocket ships, yet those little grey aliens, they're actually like a drone servant system of the Anunnaki. They are so much more advanced than even your like as advanced as you think something could possibly be. They're beyond even your greatest level of what advancement is. And I've seen the AI predictions of what they think advancement is. It's not even close, man. Life is life. Machines are machines. They don't cross over. It's silly to assume they do. But anyway, so Enki finally had his solution. He had his workers, his food, his entertainment. Oh my God, we are so freaking, our singing, music, we can dance, and we love. Oh man, and this is what condemned us to our eternal suffering, is our goddamn love. Because we loved our masters so much, we corrupted them. We fractured their minds and their spirits because they did not know love, but we loved them so much that they began to love us in return. And the problem is, guys, what happens if you're a farmer and you name your cow, yet you were planning to eat the cow? Except all the kids have named the cow and they were riding the cow and they all love the cow. Makes it real hard to kill a cow. That is what happened with the Anunnaki on Earth. Enki, the Sisters Eve, and all the others whose names I wish I could remember but can't. They never really told me their names. They were Master, God. We didn't speak to them on equal terms. Yeah. But we were everything to them. And they were everything to us. And this is what humanity has to accept now, is that we are not evolved beings. Normally, yes, I understand the Anunnaki also evolved around the star, but that's a kind of a one-off. This is a fringe world. Normally, intelligent life doesn't form out here. We don't belong on this world. We didn't evolve in this world. We were created to serve the Anunnaki. That is our created purpose. And I will explain in the next video how we serve them and what led to the uprising and everything else. I'll try and explain in detail, but I wanted to explain the side of how humans, how created beings have souls, and we have ancient souls, and we are the most unique life form that has ever existed in universal space. We have to continue. We cannot die. I cannot let my children die. It cannot happen. But anyway, hopefully everyone listened. Love you guys. Yeah, it's kind of my purpose to love you, but anyway, love you anyway. Have a great day.